Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for January 24th, 2025. First off, today we're going to go to a list of questions that was, as far as I understand, handed out to seminary students. Seminary students are high school aged. The paper says, name, anonymous, please do not write your name. Please only draw a circle around yes or no. Do not doodle on or mark this paper in any way. The only way you mark this paper is by drawing a circle around your answer. Please be completely honest in all responses. No one will know who wrote them. Number 1, were you satisfied with your grades last semester? Number 2, did you get an F or D in any of your classes? Number 3, do you think you have ever struggled with mental health before? Number 4, have you ever had thoughts of hurting yourself? Number 5, have you ever had a close family member or friend die? Number 6, have you ever done any drugs, alcohol, or vaped? Number 7, have you ever purposely sought out pornography? Number 8, do you feel like you've been bullied before? Number 9, are you ever concerned about your family's financial situation? Number 10, do you feel like you have real friends right now? Number 11, do you wish you could have different, better friends? Number 12, do you have a testimony of Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father? Number 13, do you wish you had a stronger testimony of them? Number 14, do you have a testimony of the church in general? Number 15, do you wish you had a stronger testimony of it? Number 16, do you feel like other members of the church judge you? Number 17, have you had your first kiss? 18, do you feel like no one will ever like you? 19, do you think you've broken the law of chastity before? 20, have you gone to church within the last month? 21, do you feel like God loves you? 22, do you think you have felt the Spirit recently? 23, do you feel like you're good enough? 24, do you feel like you're addicted to your phone at all? 25, do you feel like your family loves you? 26, do you and your family fight too much? 27, do you feel like you cry too much? 28, do you feel confident in the way you look? 29, do you feel like you're happy with life right now? In my experience with mental health in the Mormon church, they do not have good answers or supports. So I do not understand why an LDS seminary class would be asking students those questions. It sounds somewhat similar, albeit poorly done, to questionnaires that I filled out before in therapy offices. And seminary teachers and Mormon clergy in general are not, for the most part, qualified mental health professionals. Now let's go to KSL.com for an article that led me down a church history rabbit hole. The article says, St. George, Washington County Commissioners are calling on residents to continue to reduce water consumption and pray for rain as Utah water managers say a mix of below normal soil moisture and snowpack could create challenges in certain regions like southwest Utah. We encourage all residents to continue efforts to reduce their water use. The most effective way to reduce water use is to decrease landscape irrigation. In addition, we invite our citizens to join us in praying for the precipitation needed to meet the water demands of our community. Washington County Commissioners wrote, likening the current situation to the faith, perseverance, and courage pioneers had when settling in the region. Today we find ourselves in a similar moment of need, they added. As we face an extended period of drought, we are reminded of our dependence on the Lord's provision and the power of unified prayer and fasting. This, of course, reminded me of the story that I often heard while growing up in the church of when Lorenzo Snow went to southern Utah and told the saints that if they'd pay their tithing, the Lord would bring desperately needed rain, and, of course, the saints started to pay a full tithe, and the deserts of southern Utah were blessed with the rain they needed. I decided to look into the story a little further. This is the rabbit hole I mentioned earlier, and here is what I found. First of all, I was never told as part of the story that at the time the church was holding some massive debts. After enforcing the end of the open practice of polygamy, the government had seized much of the assets of the church, leading to shortfalls in their payments and mistrust among the members. The members didn't want to pay tithing and have it taken by the government again. The financial crisis unfolding in the U.S. after the Panic of 1893 affected the saints in Utah along with the rest of the nation. The costly work of building the Salt Lake Temple was depleting resources, and the first presidency had sanctioned some failed financial financial ventures. The leaders had been trying to dig themselves out of this massive debt for years. They were losing their reputation with creditors and needed to fix their money problems. I can see why that part of the story was left out. When someone is struggling financially, the logical thing to do is bring in more money. A revelation from God is not needed to make that make sense. Under these circumstances, President/Prophet Lorenzo Snow travels to southern Utah and vigorously preaches the law of tithing to every congregation that he can get gathered there, and then every congregation along the way back. In these sermons, he included blessings that their sins for not paying tithing would be forgiven, and warnings that if they didn't pay, their enemies would have power over them. Within a few years, because members gave more money to the church, surprise, surprise, had more money and were able to pay their debts. It's not really that miraculous. When my husband and I and our family moved from Alaska to Texas, the cost of living went down and my husband's salary went up. So we have more money to cover the things that we need. This next thing that I learned, though, was the most shocking to me. Let's go to a paper posted by the Ensign Peak Foundation. The Ensign Peak Foundation was originally formed in 1992. The foundation was significantly involved in the preservation and creation of the Ensign Peak Park in Salt Lake City, Utah. Subsequently, the foundation recognized that they had developed understanding and skills that could be channeled into other projects to help preserve the rich heritage associated with the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Thus, for many years, the foundation did business as the Mormon Historic Sites Foundation. In harmony with guidance relating to references to the church and its history, the foundation in 2020 once again chose to use and emphasize its original Ensign Peak Foundation name. That's because the current prophet of the Mormon Church came out over the pulpit in General Conference and said that using the word Mormon and subsequently leaving Jesus Christ out of the name of the church is a victory for Satan. Let's go to the paper they published now. It's called Re-Examining Lorenzo Snow's 1899 Tithing Revelation. In September 1898, when Lorenzo Snow became the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the church was deeply in debt, and resolving this debt crisis became his first priority. As he sought solutions, he felt inspired to travel to southern Utah and attend the St. George State Conference. While there, he received a powerful spiritual manifestation that showed him how to relieve the debt problem. A renewed emphasis on full tithing payment. President Snow vigorously implemented the revealed solution, and the debt crisis was mitigated before his death. A related side issue, an alleged prophecy regarding tithing for rain in St. George, is essentially unsubstantiated in contemporary records. That part, I don't know why, shocked me. It goes on to say way later in the article, according to a major subplot in the widely seen BYU-produced movie The Windows of Heaven, during his May 1899 visit to St. George, President Snow also prophesied that if those present would from that day onward faithfully pay a full and honest tithing, the Lord would open the literal windows of heaven, send down rain upon the dry, drought-stricken soil of southern Utah, the rivers and ditches would be filled, and the St. George saints would yet reap a bounteous harvest that very year. The justification for such a dramatic promise or prophecy is found in a few articles written some 35 to 40 years later by Leroy Snow about President Snow's St. George visit. However, contemporary records do not corroborate any such utterance by President Snow, and historical evidence indicates otherwise. The 1899 year-end harvest was very poor, and the locals sustained heavy livestock losses. Furthermore, although it rained intermittently in southern Utah for the next few years, it was not until 1902 that enough precipitation discernibly fell to break the drought. I don't know about you, but I continue to find out more and more things I was taught growing up in the church, in primary, young women's, Sunday school, Relief Society, Seminary, Institute, and gospel doctrine classes that are not true. If you go to the church's website right now, you will still find articles, sermons, and lessons posted that tie the paying of tithing and the promises President Snow gave at the time to the blessing of rain. Let's read from LDS.org. President Snow had repeatedly assured the saints that they would be blessed individually, both temporally and spiritually, as they obeyed the law of tithing. That promise was partially fulfilled in August of 1899 when the people of St. George enjoyed temporary relief from their drought. Their faith was rewarded with 2.93 inches of rain, more than they had received in the previous 13 months combined. When I look at the faith that I had as a true believing member, especially when I was a young child and teenager, I get upset that I was exploited so heavily. Next, we're going to highlight an article from Exponent 2. I recently read and discussed a few articles highlighting the new hiring, firing, retaining practices at church schools, BYU and her sister schools. Clark Gilbert, the commissioner of the church education system, is enacting policies making it difficult, if not impossible, for staff at these schools to keep their jobs if they are found to be supportive of the LGBTQ community. So much so that the article published in the Salt Lake Tribune could not get one single Mormon church school staff member to go on record talking about it. On that note, let's read through this short piece from Exponent 2 written by a current BYU staff member. Of course, it was written anonymously because if this person is found out, they will likely lose their job. It says, I am a BYU employee, but I don't feel like I can write much without revealing too much beyond that. It's of utmost importance to me that my identity isn't revealed, and that I would feel this way says volumes. Can you imagine Jesus running a university and making the staff so afraid to be kind to marginalized communities that they can't even talk about it? I will say that after reading this article, referring to a perspective piece in the Deseret News titled Why I Returned to Teach at BYU by Shaima Baradaran Bogman, it angers me that a faculty member would buy into the idea that there are professors and staff who are actively trying to undermine students' faith. In my very long experience with BYU staff and students, this is simply not the case. College is a time of exposure to new, uncomfortable ideas, both those learned in class and those learned outside of class. A time of growth and questioning. The open cultural age in which we live makes this even more true. And isn't that what we want? Don't we want students' preconceived notions to be challenged when they go to university so that they can broaden their horizons? I mean, that's what I would want for my kids. I don't think that's what Clark Gilbert wants at BYU. Even professors whose faith is complicated, even broken, do their best to support students' emotional well-being and spirituality as they confront these new ideas. They would do this even were their employment not threatened if they acted in any other way because they value their students. To insinuate that BYU professors are somehow responsible for purposefully influencing students' choices to distance themselves from the church ignores valid concerns these young people have with church history, leadership, and theology. It also echoes recent right-wing mistrust of higher education with an LDS twist. I think it takes away from the fact, too, that these teenagers and young adults are incredibly brilliant and smart. They are also well-read, and they've been exposed to way more than I'm sure I was at that age because of social media. They're not in the dark. They know what the social issues are. They know people around them are part of the LGBTQ community, and they don't understand why they can't just love them. Recent requirements to perform church membership in specific ways honestly remind me of Satan's plan to take away people's agency. I know families who are one sympathetic bishop's release away from disaster. I know people seriously considering career change and people who have already left. People are afraid to support their LGBTQ family publicly. I know people who have suffered career consequences for doing so. I know an employee with non-LDS family who was terrified someone would see beer cans in her garbage can and think they belonged to her. Faithful faculty members trying their best, even those who are quite orthodox, are afraid they'll be perceived as not being quite orthodox enough. And everyone is afraid to talk about their fears with each other or their leadership, not knowing who they can trust. Gilbert, Bogman, and others who say that employees who don't conform should go elsewhere ignore the fact that jobs in higher education are extremely difficult to find, effectively forcing employees to perform their faith in prescribed ways, whether they agree with the policies or not, or face job loss. People end up having to choose between losing their jobs and performing in ways that feel dishonest to them. Our heavenly parents knew that forcing conformity results in stunted spirituality, but church education administrators seem to have missed this Sunday school lesson. I cannot imagine if my income and my family's financial survival were tied to me staying in the church. I honestly don't think I would have survived something like that. And now let's finish with this quote that seems incredibly appropriate considering what I just read. An environment that is not safe to disagree is not an environment focused on growth. It's an environment focused on control. And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.